Hello, welcome to Canyons Church. We are so glad to have you here with us today. I know that some of you, this is like celebration. There's reason to celebrate today because you're here. You just needed to accomplish one thing today, and this is it. So congratulations, you did it. Others of you, this is just thanks for stopping by. We're glad that you're here. You got a ton of things on your plate, and there's so much to get done right now. However, my promise to you is I believe that this will be beneficial for you, for your family, for those that you love, those that love you, your present and your future. So there's a little bit at stake here. I think that this is important. This is a good conversation to have. One thing I want to let you know about is our mission to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. That is why we exist. That's why Canyons Church exists. Whether online, whether in person, day in and day out, this is the heartbeat behind Canyons Church. Something else I want you to know about is a upcoming event. Actually, we have two of them that I'll let you know. The first one is July 25th. It's Canyons Cookout. So we're going to go from 6 to 8 o'clock at night to Pioneer Park here in Lewiston, Idaho. If you're able to make it, great. We're going to have some food for you. Just come out and enjoy a good evening with your family, with some friends. We just want to create community and have a good night together. Second thing that we have in store for you is Canyons Campout. So this is coming up August 12th through the 14th at Hell's Gate State Park. If you are interested in that, it's a lot of fun. We did this last year. We got to play in the river a little bit and just relax with each other and enjoy a couple days camping out. If you're interested at all, whether it's going to be for a day or all of the time or just an evening or whatever it might be, please get a hold of us. You can email Rayla@canyonschurch.net. And we can try to coordinate with you, see when you're going to be able to be there so we can reserve the campsites ahead of time. Anyway, back to our today. We are in part 3 of the road ahead. This is the concluding part, and I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. If you've ever had a difficult, challenging season, you can go ahead and raise your hand. If you're not in an awkward position, or if you're driving, keep both hands on the steering wheel if you're listening to this. But if you've had an awkward situation, a difficult season, a challenging season before, you're going to have more of them, right? That's what we're promised in life, that life is going to be difficult, and that's the promise. You're gonna see some challenges, and that's it. We're not even promised good days, although I think most of us have those from time to time. And even if you're like, man, I don't know the last time I was in a bad, difficult, challenging season, you're probably gonna have some coming up, because again, that's what happens in life. It's not always happy. We do love happy times, but that's not where we live 100% of the time, right? We have the ups and downs, the ebb and flow of life. And in those darker, more frustrating moments, it's often difficult to see what's out in front of us. We live in a world where the most successful people in this world, like financially, job and career-wise, they're not looking at what they have to do just today. They're looking at not just a week from now, not just a month from now. They're looking at like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What are the decisions that they're going to make at that point? I mean, we look way, way, way out in front. But what happens when the world falls apart, when our plans fall apart, when something else that we didn't plan on meets us face to face? All of a sudden, the plans go out the window, and often we don't know what the next step should be. We like to have 5 steps at least, and we don't even know the next step. And if you're in that spot, you can feel handcuffed, you can feel paralyzed, you can feel blinded by this moment. You could feel at a loss as far as what we should do. And thankfully, throughout the series, we're talking about what we can do, regardless of how bad of a situation we're in, whether you're in one right now or you're going to be in one eventually, whether you're just got out of one or wherever you're at in life. You're going to have this moment, and you're going to have some opportunities of things that you can always do, regardless of what's ahead. So the bottom line throughout the series has been this: don't let what we don't know rob us of what we can do. There's always something you can do. You always have choices. You always have options. You may not be able to choose the scenario, the circumstance that you find yourself in, but you always have a choice of how to respond, how to react in those seasons, in those moments. We've been looking through John chapter 11 and 12. 11 is kind of obviously the precursor to 12, but John chapter 11 tells one story. John chapter 12 tells the response to that story and to that moment. So just a heads up, as we've looked at this story from a couple different angles so far, we're going to look at the third and final perspective today. And actually, we're looking through the eyes and through the lens of three different siblings. They have very drastically different experiences, and they respond differently. So these are things that you can always do. These are always available for you to do. So just to give you full context, chapter 11 of John, really it talks about this moment where Jesus is with his disciples, and he gets word from some very good, very close friends of his, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. These are three siblings. And Lazarus is sick. That's what they send him. Lazarus is sick. We don't know what to do. He's not going to last much longer. This isn't like he's got a cold. He's got the sniffles. He's not doing well, and we're not sure how long he's going to last. Jesus, we believe that you are who you say you are. We need you. You're our last and only hope. Would you please come and save him, your friend, Lazarus? And Jesus, the hero, always and forever, the one that does the right thing every single time, the one that we try to emulate in our life, what does he do in this moment? I'll tell you what he doesn't do. He doesn't rush off immediately to go help his friend. He stays in the location that he's at for for a while longer, for a couple more days. That's not what we would expect from Jesus. We would have thought that he would have been like, okay, we got to go. Like, pick up your stuff. We don't even need to grab all that stuff. Let's just go right now. But that's not what he does. He travels. He moves at his own time. By the time he gets there, Lazarus has died. So he shows up, and he doesn't even show up in time for the funeral. They've already mourned the loss. They've had the funeral. They've had the celebration of life. They've already buried him. They've done the whole ceremony, everything without Jesus. I mean, that would have been nice for Jesus, their friend, the rabbi, to actually do the ceremony, but he didn't show up for that either. He didn't show up in time for any of it. So when he finally shows up days later, Lazarus he's dead. He's dead. He's very much dead. And the sisters come out, and what do you think their response is? Where were you? Why weren't you here? Why weren't you here? Where are you, Jesus? And Jesus mourns with them, and then he does something that is so it's crazy, really. He tells them to move the stone. Hey, can you guys, the tomb that Lazarus is buried in, can you open that back up, please? And the thoughts that were running through the crowd, through their minds had to be, it would be interesting to hear what some of those people had to say. Some of them, I'm sure, were like, you missed it. You missed it. Why are we going to redo the ceremony? Why are we going to let you mourn specially because you came at your own pace? Other people were like, don't open that. That's not going to smell pleasant. That's not the image that I want to have of my friend Lazarus, right? That's probably what some of them are thinking. I don't want to see that. But they open the tomb up for him. And then Jesus calls Lazarus forward. Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus, in his burial clothing, I mean, he's wrapped up like a mummy, walks out alive and well. So that's John chapter 11. John chapter 12 is kind of what happens in the aftermath of all of that. So John chapter 12, verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Just to be clear, same Lazarus that we're talking about. This isn't a different Lazarus. This is the same one that we're talking about. And here in verse 2, we start to see some of the things that you can do regardless of what you're up against, regardless of what you face, or if you do or don't know what your next step is. Here's some examples. Here, dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served. That's the first example. While Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Now, we talked about Martha week 1, that Martha served. This is a very appropriate response. When you experience a miracle like this, when you experience something so extraordinary, one of the appropriate responses for that should be to serve, to do for somebody else, to prioritize somebody else over yourself. That's a very appropriate response. Lazarus, we talked about this last week, is like, hold on, you get a second chance at life and you're just like reclining. But there's a bigger, broader picture that Lazarus is actually teaching us, that we can learn something from death. We can learn something from this moment. That Lazarus actually shows us that he's practicing the presence of Jesus. He's actually practicing his presence. He is prioritizing spending time with Jesus. He has a second chance at life. He could be doing anything to cross the stuff off of his bucket list. And instead, he's spending time with Jesus. This is that important. It's interesting. This is a dinner party, right? And ultimately, this is what we're looking at. That Jesus comes back into town and they throw a party. They're like, oh, okay, come on over. We're going to have a big party. Everybody that was at the funeral, everybody that saw you raise him back to life, we're going to have everybody back over for dinner again, and we're going to celebrate you. You're going to be the guest of honor, Jesus. As we've talked through this series so far, this is kind of the vision that God has for all of us. When you become a Jesus follower, when you decide to prioritize Jesus in your life and start that relationship, that you're invited, everyone's invited, but you're invited to a dinner party in your future. At some point in eternity, we're going to be sitting down. There's going to be a dinner party. Jesus is going to be there. And eventually there's going to be some remember when moments, right? We're going to go around the table. We're going to share our stories. Hopefully there's going to be some laughter, maybe some crying. I don't know. Tears of joy, I guess. I don't know what heaven's going to be like exactly, but I can't wait to get there. There's going to be this promise that we're going to be at a dinner party with Jesus, and he's going to be the guest of honor. And throughout the series, we're talking about the story that we're going to be able to tell in that moment, that this moment is actually about that future moment. So what we're looking at is actually kind of like it's a brief foreshadowing of what's to come for all of us. I'm sure that in this moment that people actually did stand up and share their experience, their perspective, what they were thinking when all of this was happening. When Jesus said, hey, roll the stone away, I want to do something, I'm sure they were telling each other what their thoughts were. Like, I couldn't believe it. Lazarus, he probably gets up and shares something too. Maybe he kicks it off like an awards ceremony. He's like, hey, can everyone quiet down for a second? We're gonna go around the room and share our stories, but before we get started, I just want to first and foremost, I want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Without him, I wouldn't be here today, right? Maybe that's the first time in one of those scenes, in one of those moments in the world that's said. Maybe he goes on to say, Jesus, I just want to real quick say thank you. Thank you for doing what you did for me. Because I walk around in this world and in this life, and people have those near-death experiences. They tell us these stories about how close they were to death and, the harrowing experiences that they've had. And I've never had a story to share before until now. And now I just let them, go throughout their whole story. And then I'll be like, so you had a near-death experience? Wow, that must have been difficult, man. I died. No, not like I got close to that. I literally died. For days, I was very dead. I was buried. I was in a tomb. I was done. I was out of my body. I was done, not close any longer. And then Jesus, my friend, he came back and he saved me. He brought me back to life. You know, maybe if he would have been on time, maybe it would have been a near-death experience. But because Jesus, I don't know, he said something like he or his dad, they created time altogether. So they function, you know, they go at their own pace, I guess, is what they do. But because he didn't travel at our time, at our pace, he showed up when he did. And it transitioned from a near-death experience to a post-death experience. I'm alive today after I was dead because of my friend Jesus. That's a story to end all stories, right? I don't know what that moment was like. I don't know if they went around the table and shared their own experiences. I would assume something along those lines happened. And what we look at next is what Mary is doing. So Martha's serving. Lazarus is reclining. Maybe he's hosting. Maybe he's entertaining. Maybe he's greeting everyone. He's so excited, but he's reclining with Jesus in this moment. Maybe that's what he's doing. But what we know that happens next and what we see that happens next is what I want to talk about for the rest of our morning. And we've looked at two siblings. Now we're going to look at the third sibling. I don't know if they're in age order that they're shared, but we just assume that the third sibling is the best because that's, if you can guess what sibling I am. Anyway, so we're going to look at verse 3. That's a joke. That was a joke. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Now let's just real quick. I'm going to give you some just very quick reactions. And some of this comes from like junior high me, so be aware. First of all, nard is not the same nard that I used to talk about when I was in junior high. It's not something that you kick. Anyway, that's a whole other. Okay. Secondly, I bet it filled the whole house. Like if you're talking about an entire pint of perfume is poured out all at once. I did student ministries for years, a lot of years. And when I would go to camps, I would check first day I was like, okay, who's got the aerosol deodorant? Like they would douse themselves in it. And that wasn't even close to a pint. They would, if you want to do something for the world and you have a junior high boy, quit buying him aerosol deodorant. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for the planet, apparently. It's not good for us. It's not good for sleeping bags that get sprayed or people that have to sit by oh my goodness, it is. Whew. You know. It fills up your house too, doesn't it? Anyway, I bet that she filled up the house with this fragrance. This was not something that she did subtly. This wasn't something that wasn't noticed. Everyone noticed that she was at his feet, that she had poured out an entire pint of perfume. That's a lot. And that she was washing his feet with this perfume with her hair. So we see Martha served, Lazarus reclined. What did Mary do? Mary poured out her best. She didn't hold back. She poured out. She didn't try to do this quietly. She just did this vulnerably in front of everyone. She couldn't help but respond in this way. She poured out her best. That's what she did. As we're thinking about this moment that Mary's having, right? She's laying it all out there. She's doing whatever can. She's literally pouring out her best. I don't think that she was only thinking about that moment, the John 12 moment. I think that she was actually thinking back, just like everybody else was. They were reminiscing over previously what had happened, the reason why they were celebrating. And she was probably remembering how she walked through that moment. So John chapter 11 shows us this. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." Same posture is interesting. Same posture as John chapter 12, but different attitude, different mindset behind all of it. And if you remember from the first week of this series, you're like, wait. Isn't this pretty similar? Isn't this pretty close to what Martha also said? Yeah, very close. You know why? Because we all would have said that. We all would have thought that. We all would have challenged Jesus in this way. Why? Because if you believe that he is who he said he is, the Son of God, the Messiah, if you'd watched him heal other people, if you knew he was capable of it, and you had a deep friendship with him, why would you not expect him to move on your behalf in the appropriate time? Why aren't you here? Why weren't you here in time? Where have you been? You prayed that? Where are you, God? Have you prayed that? Have you asked that? Have you wondered that? Because God moves at his own pace, at his own time. And sometimes he seems like he's way out in front of us. And sometimes it seems like we're trying to pull him along and get him to catch up. God moves at his own perfect timing. And sometimes we get the results that we want, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes the results happen in a completely different way, at a completely different time than we ever expected. And sometimes we have to mourn the loss before we see the victory, before we have something to celebrate again. So Mary has this moment. She's kneeling down. She poured on Jesus' feet. She's wiping with her hair, his feet, an entire pint of this expensive perfume. Same posture, different mindset. Right? Same posture, different mindset. Interestingly enough, in life, the challenges in our lives are chapters. The faithfulness of Jesus is the story. We get this confused. We think that what we're facing is the story. It's not. It's part of the story. It's part of the journey along the way. But it is not the story. The story is Jesus' faithfulness. He is there. He is here. He is with you. He is for you. Even if we don't see him move on our behalf in our timing, doing what we want him to do, Jesus is still faithful. Jesus is faithful, and that is the story. And we should not get these two confused. We often, when we start to focus so much on the present moment, we lose sight of the bigger picture. When we focus so much on the challenges that we're facing, the chapter that we're in, we don't see the bigger, broader picture of Jesus' faithfulness being the story. When we get so caught up in the moment, it's hard to remember the dinner party that we're headed to. Because it feels like the world is caving in on us. That our plans that we had, the good plans that we had, the good things that we were hoping for, they're being lost. They're moving away. They're breaking up. Whatever it might be that you're facing or you have faced. It's different, isn't it? And when we get so focused on it being different than our plan, we miss out on his plan. Not that his plan was to provide you with pain. No, that's just life. Life provides the pain. But his plan is different often than what we see. Why? Because he sees it all. He's with us all the time. His plan is to get us to the dinner party in eternity, not to give you the answers to the test that you're taking right now. I'm going to challenge us to do what Mary did, but do it differently. See, Mary, if you're paying attention, Mary pours out her best, but Mary pours out her best after the circumstances change. I think we can get behind that, right? We want to respond to the thing that's already happened. Once the circumstances change, once it starts to go our way, once it finally works itself out, once we know the end result, the end of the chapter, so to speak, once we know that, then we're okay, and then we feel good about pouring out our best. That's not my challenge for you. My challenge is for you to do what Mary did, but sooner, but beforehand. Why? Because that's going to make a far greater story around that dinner party table. In your eternity, you're going to have a moment to share what you're doing right now, or to share what you're doing in that difficult, challenging season. Could you imagine if the story would have been different for Mary, Martha, and Lazarus? Lazarus, Martha, they do their thing. But could you imagine the story that Mary would have been able to say? That when she saw Jesus in chapter 11, when she saw Jesus for the first time since her brother had died, what if she had poured out the perfume on his feet that time? And with tears streaming down her face, said, I don't know what you're doing, what you've been doing, what you will do. What I do know is that I am submitted to you, that I love you, that you are worth it to pour out my best for you, because you are who you say you are. And I believe that you will do what you say you will do, even when it looks different than what I see. Could you imagine that story? I would wager that if Mary had done that, she wouldn't have been the one that was sharing that story at the dinner party. It could have been anyone there. It could have been Jesus. Could you imagine? Could you imagine just for a second if that would have happened? Everyone's going around the story. Jesus tinks his glass. He's like, hey, just so we're all clear, there's something that happened that day that I was amazed at. And it's this woman that sits here with me, or is at my feet right now. That she poured out her best before she saw the way that it was going to end up. Or when she thought it had already ended up one way before she saw what I was going to do. She already poured out her best. That's my challenge for you. That's my hope for you. Because there's going to be a day where a dinner party's had and a story is told. My hope for you is that you write such a good story now that maybe even somebody else shares your story. And maybe it's Jesus. I don't know how that all works or how it's going to work or how it's going to look. But just the thought of that is compelling. So Mary poured out her best. I want you to pour out your best. You can do this at any time, at any moment in your life. Regardless of circumstance, you can always pour out your best. Now, for the rest of our time today, I'm going to shift gears a little bit from how you can pour out your best for you to what it looks like as an organization, what it looks like for our Canyons Church to pour out our best. There's some incredible folks that do these things already. So this is identifying what we're already doing, also calling to light what we're going to be doing, and continue to do in order to create a greater and greater story for our community and for our future. So what does it look like? What does pouring out our best look like in the road ahead at Canyons Church? What does this look like? First of all, to be joyful. That's what it looks like. I believe, Disneyland says that they're the happiest place on earth. I believe that the church, the local church, should be the most joyful of anywhere on the planet. Why? Because we have the best reason to be most joyful anywhere on the planet. Not that we are loved the best or more than anybody else, but that there's a God that loves us, that is for us, that is with us, that has done everything in order to make a way for us to be in relationship with Him. That regardless of our circumstance, we are called and invited to a dinner party that's going to happen down the road. Regardless of how difficult it is right now, there's going to be a dinner party that we are going to be at. And we have an opportunity to create a story now for then. And part of that, and part of being at Canyons Church, and part of being part of this organization, whether you're just tuning in online, which is awesome, we love that you're doing that. Whether you're showing up at church, physically in our building, or whether you're serving, or whether you're giving, or whether you're part of a small group, or whether you're inviting other people around. When you engage with us, you're part of Canyons Church, and part of being at Canyons Church is being joyful. I think for too long, the church has been known for what it is against and what it's opposed to. For us, for Canyons Church, we're going to be known by what we are for. And here's what we believe, that God is for our community. God is for you. And so are we. That's why we are for LCV, the LC Valley, Lewis and Clark Valley here. So, be joyful. Be joyful. That is what it looks like to pour out your best. The next step, the next point, help the next generation win. And if I could be honest with you, this is an area that we need to improve. We need to work on. This is too important to just let it do its own thing, right? And we are actively pursuing improving our areas and our environments for our kids. And I think we have some great ones in Wambaland and Upstreet. But we need to start a student ministry. We need to have some people step up into that role. And I understand, I know, it's difficult. And I'm not just going to throw anybody in there. But we're asking, we're searching, we're looking for, we're praying for someone to fill a gap. Why? Because it's a gap. And it's too important of a gap to leave unfilled. The next generation is everything. Somebody helped you along the way. Somebody donated, sacrificed their time, their energy, their resources in order for you to be where you're at right now. Why wouldn't we do that for the next generation? If we want to continue to move forward, if you've ever complained about or worried about our community, our nation, our world, and the future of it, this is how that changes. This is how we do something about it. And hopefully, when we provide an environment that doesn't just teach kids to avoid the world, that doesn't just teach students that they need to be sheltered and be separate and away from everybody else, but to actually be leaders in it, to learn how to function in a world that can, yes, be dangerous, that can, yes, be difficult to walk through, and can absolutely and needs to absolutely have an impact from a God that loves them. And they need to be the banner carriers of that there's a God that is for them, regardless of what the circumstance they face. This is what we get to do with the next generation. We provide them the resources, we provide them the understanding, the knowledge that God is with them, that God loves them. Why wouldn't you do this? Anyway, so that's part of being a Canyons Church, is we help the next generation win. Like I said, we have some great volunteers that are already doing this. We need some more. We need some more out in Upstreet. We're trying to rally the troops and get some more people in position, and they're getting there. But if you think, I could probably do that, I should probably do that, please let us know, because we need some extra people. And not just people to fill space, not just people to show up, put their time in. And I get it. You've got so many reasons. I want to say excuses, but you got reasons. You got reasons why it's too difficult, it's too taxing, it's too, you don't have enough energy, you're tired right now. I get it. Does that create a better story? Yeah. I would have loved to have helped impact the next generation that's coming up behind me. Maybe you're at the dinner party table that you're sitting by, you're looking into the face of some of those people in that generation. I would have loved to have helped you out, but, I just had too much on my plate. I couldn't do that for you. That's not a good story. That's not a good story. And yeah, it's a reason why you're not doing this right now, but it's not a good story, and it won't be a good story. And my hope for you is that you have a good story, and this is part of it. We prioritize at Canyons Church. We help the next generation win. It is too valuable. It is too important to let this one slide. The next thing is to be generous. To be generous. You may not know this, but you sit next to, and you are part of a church that has some of the most generous people that you know. Maybe you don't know. Right? We have incredibly generous people that have put into practice and prioritized to give first, to save second, and to live on the rest. That we recognize that God has done something for us, that we are stewards of resources, and that what comes to our hands is not just ours to hoard and not just ours to build our own empire, but it's actually a resource that we get to use for some other people, to make an impact in our community that we love, to make an impact in the community that God loves. So we have a community of people that have prioritized to give first. And this looks like you've actually figured out a number. You figured out a percentage that you're going to give. And you're not just going to give it once, you're going to give it on a regular basis. And you figured out how often you're going to give and what the plan is in place to give first, to save second, and then to live on budget with the rest. So be generous. I promise you that the happiest people that you know are some of the most generous people that you know. It's the way it works. When we give, our hearts are softened. When we give, we actually see the world differently. It changes our perspective. Anyway, that's a whole other sermon for another day. But be generous. And next is that excellence matters. Part of Canyons Church, how we pour out our best at Canyons Church, is that excellence matters. This does not mean that perfection is the goal. Perfection is not the goal. Excellence is the goal. Why? Because whatever you do, do it with all your heart. For this is honoring, this is glorifying your Father in heaven. Right? The excellence matters. To do something on purpose, for a purpose, at a higher standard, that matters. That changes things. And let me tell you that when you do it this way, when you live this way, when you serve this way at Canyons Church, it creates a greater impact for those that are walking into our building. Right? Because they see that we've thought about our guests first. If you've ever walked into our doors for the first time at Canyons Church, we've thought about you, we've prayed for you, we've planned for you before you ever showed up, before you ever accepted the invitation, before you ever decided, I'm going to try that church out today. Before you ever did that, we've been planning and preparing for you. And I hope, and our hope, is that your experience, you recognize that we're doing something excellent, that we're doing something that is engaging, we're doing something that you want to be a part of. And then, part of pouring out our best is not about being our best for us. It's not about creating an environment that shows how great and creative and wonderful we are. That's not what it's about. It all comes back to following Jesus. This is everything. Right? Jesus, it's not just about saying a prayer. It's not just about church attendance. He asked us to follow him. That means to live like him, prioritize like him, see other people the way that he did, to live like him. That's what following Jesus is like, and that's what it's about. It's not reciting a prayer. It's an ongoing conversation. It's moving in a direction, not staying in one place. It's growth. Following Jesus. Let me promise you this. If you're following Jesus, if that's your priority, those other things that we've already listed, excellence matters, and to be generous and helping the next generation win and to be joyful, those things you're already doing. If you're following Jesus, you're already doing those things. And if you're following Jesus and one of those things was like, haven't been too joyful lately. Haven't been super generous lately. Maybe we recognize that that's part of following Jesus, that we should do something about that. Again, is this about, trying to make Canyons Church great? No, it's about creating a greater impact in our community that we love so much. And your generosity, let's just speak about that. Your generosity leads to life change. And I know, again, we're talking about story and that dinner party that we're one day going to be at. And I hope for your sake that your story doesn't go, man, I had a nice boat. Put a lot of money into that thing. I hope that you do have a nice boat. But I hope that you're able to also say, man, it is amazing when you're generous what happens. That when you're generous, doors open. That when you prioritize giving, that lives are changed and things happen in return that I never even expected. I got opportunities that I never planned for, and I was blessed because of that. And God gave me time and time again, I saw the doors open for me. And the more I was faithful, the more I was generous, the more that He was generous with me. And I had a boat, but I didn't deserve it. I hope that that is your story that you get to tell, right? It's not about how much you can gain, but how much you can give. And that giving, it moves to your peace. It's a better story. Your happiness, it is a better story in the end. We're not living for our today, for this moment, but a future moment. Now, a couple things just as we finish up and close out today. Let's just kind of re-go over all of it. Don't let what we don't know rob us of what we can do. There's always something to do. There's always a next step. Even if you can't see the next step that you've been planning on, there's always something that you can do in the meantime. And Martha and Lazarus and Mary show us that you can serve. If you don't know what's next, you can serve. You can prioritize somebody else. You can put your time, energy, and efforts into prioritizing somebody else and making them feel loved and cared for. Why? Because one of the best ways that we can show God our love for Him is how well we love those around us, those others that He loves also. Lazarus reclined. We find out that Lazarus is not just lazy. I mean, he's not lazy at all. But Lazarus is actually prioritizing spending time with Jesus. That of all the things that he could do, that this is important. And spending time with Jesus creates margin for the good times and especially for the challenging times up ahead. You're going to need strength for those moments. And then Mary poured out her best. That's what we see. That at any moment, whatever you're up against, however good or bad life might be right now, you can always, always, always pour out your best. You can always do that. That the challenges in our lives are chapters. It's not the end of the story. It's not even the whole story. It's a part of the story, but it's not the end. The full story, the faithfulness of Jesus is the story. That's where we're headed. In this story, it leads back to Jesus, back to that dinner party that we're invited to. So can we do this? Can we do this together? There's too much at stake for you, for your family tree, those generations coming after you. It's too important for you not to prioritize this. It's too important for our community. It's too important for our church for you to take this lightly. There's about 40,000 people in our surrounding area that they would say that they're not involved, they're not a part of any church or religion. They might even say that they're far from God. And we have an opportunity to do something in order for them to recognize how close and near and loving God is. Would you do this? Would you jump on board with us, please? It's not about watching. It's not about attending. It's about steps that we're taking in a direction that we're moving. This, what you see, is not it. This is the start of something more. And you have an invitation to be a part of it. You have steps that you can take. You know what you need to do. Might not feel good in the moment, but you're creating a better story. You're creating a larger impact. You're impacting lives that you may not ever be able to have a chance in this life to talk to them about and hear about, but you might find yourself in somebody else's story at that dinner table based on how you live and how you act and what you do now. So, that's my hope for you. That's what I believe God's hope for you is as well. That we would live in such a way that we create a great story down the road. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you do for us. God, you open the doors, you close doors, you help us navigate. God, I pray that we would learn that you are trustworthy, that we can rely on you, that you are faithful, that you are generous with us, that you are kind with us. And when our circumstances get difficult, when they get hard, when we don't know what else to do or where to turn, God, I pray that we would choose to serve, that we would choose to practice your presence, that we would pour out our best, even before we see the end result. Or if we thought the end of that chapter had already happened, that we would choose to pour out our best in spite of the fact that circumstances did not end up how we thought they would. God, you are worth our praise. You are worth our adoration. You are worth us saying thank you. God, I love you. We thank you for everything that you do for us. And I pray that we would do something for you today, this week, that we prioritize you in our life. In your name we pray.
Christ who lives within me, Christ who lives within me. From beginning to the end, you deserve the glory, you deserve the glory. Yeah. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me, Christ who lives within me. From beginning to the end, you deserve the glory, you deserve the glory. You are God, you're the great I am. Come on, breath of life, I breathe you in. Even
Take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. And oh, the joy I've found surrendering my crown at the feet of the King, who surrendered everything. And oh, the peace that comes when I'm broken and undone by your unfailing grace. I can lift my voice and say, oh, you can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Oh, take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. Oh, we sing, you can have it all, Lord. Yes, you can. Every part of my world. Oh, take this life and breathe on this heart that is now There is no greater call than giving you my all. I lay it all down. I lay it all down. There is no greater love, no higher name above. I lay it all down. I lay it all down. There is no greater call than giving you my all. I lay it all down. I lay it all down. There is no greater love, no higher than above. I lay it all down. I lay it all. Sing it You can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Oh, take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. It's yours. It's yours. 'Cause you can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Oh, take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Coming back next week, we actually are starting a brand new 2-part series that you're not going to want to miss. It's called Your New Default, and it's a good one. It's going to be a good one for leadership perspectives, for teams that you're a part of. It's going to be very practical, and you're not going to want to miss it. So come on back for that. Also, don't forget about the Canyons Cookout, which is July 25th at Pioneer Park in Lewiston from 6 to 8 p.m., as well as Canyons Campout at Hell's Gate State Park on August 12th through the 14th. You can get a hold of us and let us know, RSVP with us, so we can reserve you a spot. How about that? So, hope you're doing well. Hope to see you soon.